In Latin America and across the world, celebrations are underway to mark the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. In Caracas, Venezuela, trade unionists and other organizations have been marching through the city to the Miraflores presidential palace. Some of them drew a parallel between Russia's October Revolution and the Bolivarian experience begun by President Hugo Chavez. We'll go live to Caracas in a moment, but first to Russia itself, where the 100th anniversary has been marked with rallies and marches. Red flags and portraits of Lenin were prominent at the march and rally, organized in Moscow by the Russian Communist Party, the largest opposition party in the Russian parliament. Other organizations were holding other events, but President Vladimir Putin Venezuela's Constituent Assembly has confirmed the lifting of parliamentary immunity from Freddy Guevara, the opposition leader accused of inciting violence during protests earlier this year. Guevara took refuge in the Chilean embassy in Caracas after the Supreme Court moved to cancel his immunity on Friday. Details in this report.
Freddy Guevara has been in the residence of the Chilean ambassador in Caracas since the weekend, waiting for an answer to his request for political asylum. He says his security is being threatened after the Supreme Court asked the Constituent Assembly to lift his parliamentary immunity so that he can be judged as the main promoter of violence in Venezuela between April and July. The protest left over 130 people dead.
Criminally speaking, one thing is the person who directly commits the crime, and another is the person who influences, helps, or orders it. This is an indirect or second-hand crime, and its technical name is incitement to commit a felony.
The Venezuelan government has reacted quickly. The foreign ministry released a statement which supports the decision of the Supreme Court and says the actions of Freddy Guevara in relation to those violent events are public and widely known.
Normally, asylum is for those who are politically persecuted. There's been a lot of talk here about so-called political prisoners, but what we have here is politicians in prison. Because what kind of political prisoner is a man or woman who causes death and destruction on a large scale? A serious interruption of public order in a really democratic state, where the public institutions readily submit themselves to regular elections.
The Constituent Assembly called on the lawmaker and leader of Popular Will to appear before it on Monday afternoon, but he didn't attend for obvious reasons.
What you expect from a serious leader is that he assumes his responsibility, and this could be his opportunity to prove the consistency of his ideas. If he was serious, he will show up for trial or try to mobilize his own political supporters to accompany him.
Freddy Guevara is staying as a guest in the residence of the Chilean ambassador in Venezuela, waiting for an answer to his request for political asylum. The opposition leader, who is in contempt of court, will be judged for the crimes of association, repeated incitement, and the use of teenagers to commit a crime.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has held a meeting with the legendary Argentinian footballer Diego Armando Maradona. At the military circle, Maduro greeted Maradona, who talked about his experiences with Commander Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro. Among other activities, the World Soccer star is in Venezuela to coordinate his participation in a special TV program for Telesur for the 2018 World Cup.
We have the visit of a really good friend of Venezuela, a great partner. We are always excited to see him anywhere in the world. But if he's in Venezuela, the excitement is double. We're talking about the Golden Boy, the great Diego Armando Maradona. Diego, welcome. Today I wanted to greet him, but he spent all day in Telesur signing papers.
Hoy acabamos de firmar.
Today we just signed with Patricia that we're going to do a program for Russia here in Telesur.
What are you going to call it?
From the hand of number 10, with Maradona.
Over there is Patricia Villegas. She should be applauded. Telesur president.
Back to Caracas now, and to our correspondent Reagan Devines. He's been on that march and joins us now. Hello, Reagan. Describe the move there on the march for the October Revolution.
Hi, Sonia. Yes, we saw thousands of Venezuelans come out, more or less mirroring those marches that are being held in Russia in support of their overthrow of imperialism back in 1917. And we saw many people come out with placards featuring Lenin, Stalin, these historic leaders. And they were all pretty much in support of anything really that promotes and supports a socialist regime, socialist revolution government. For we all know the socialist government here in Venezuela has supported millions of Venezuelans, and Russia and Venezuela share a close relationship. And so that march was particularly emotional for quite a few, because they connected so closely with Russia. Of course, we've seen marches and sentiments echoed throughout the region, Peru, Bolivia, and it was quite an interesting march, Sonny, with leaders, of course, extending courtesy and congratulations to Russia for their achievements over the last century.
Okay, so thank you for that update. That's our Reagan Devines in Caracas there. On to other news. Cuba didn't need to send help to Dominica after Hurricane Maria struck the island. In the words of their ambassador, they were already there and were able to send reinforcements to the island within 72 hours. Now that they're in Dominica working, they want to help restore the electricity supply and do much-needed repair work on the island schools.
So the intention is, in the next weeks, to repair a primary school in Collywood. So this is one part of the Cuban contribution. Let me tell you something. Also, Cuba decided to send our own food and our own water for Cuban collaborators. What is the intention? Not to be a concern to the government or to be a concern to the people of Dominica. So we are self-sufficient. We are also, my people is living in, let us say, in regular condition at the National Stadium. If you can give greetings, you can go there. But the idea is to support as much as we can this process to Dominica. I always say that we are brother island, we are sister island, we are part of the Caribbean, we are ALBA member. So this is the solidarity that Cuba could provide to Dominica.
To properly respond to HIV/AIDS in the Caribbean, the region needs to develop people-centered access to services. But Ivan Cruikshank of CVC cautions that we need to make sure that access to these services remain open to the most vulnerable within the community. He was speaking at the 3rd Latin American and Caribbean Forum on Sustainability of the HIV response currently taking place in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
The second concept that I want to raise with you is to broaden the focus to the whole person. We have seen in a number of countries a retreat to a biomedical approach to address the HIV issue. And we know that particularly key populations, they have multiple cells. So there's the social side, there's the physical side, the family planning needs that need to be met, there are mental health needs that need to be met, there are psychological needs that need to be met. And so if we're going to get to the type of people-centered, expanded approach to health service delivery, we need to take into account all of the various sellers that people come to us with.
We have more news in a minute. Stay with us. Social organizations are marching in Bolivia in support of the re-election of President Evo Morales, the country's first indigenous leader, for the 2019 elections. Our correspondent Freddie Morales has the details.
A large gathering is taking place in La Paz, where several social groups have arrived at San Francisco Square to demonstrate their support of the Legislative Assembly's request. The Assembly is requesting that the Constitutional Court eliminate legal regulations that limit re-election to only one term. These social groups joined the call, which was held by a group of lawmakers. And massive gatherings like the one in La Paz also took place across the country in different cities, and this is expected to continue in the next few weeks. It's also expected that the Tribunal Court will present a final decision in mid-December, before the so-called judicial vacations. The government has also supported this measure and welcomed the support from these social groups to President Evo Morales' possible candidacy in 2019. We come back to you, Soini.
A report from Freddie Morales. The United States has ended the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, program for Nicaraguan migrants living in the country. TPS provides temporary legal status in the United States to citizens of other countries where natural disasters or civil wars have made it too dangerous for them to return. The elimination of the program won't be immediate. It will be extended until January 2019 to allow Nicaraguans to return to their country. If they don't comply, they will be considered undocumented migrants and could face deportation. Let's go live to Washington and our correspondent Jorge Gestoso. Hello, Jorge. Can you explain what this move to cancel the TPS will mean to Nicaraguans in the U.S.?
So, Jenny, Nicaraguans are going to have about 5,300, are going to have 14 months to leave definitely the states under the TPS, the Temporary Protection Status, according to an information revealed by the Department of Homeland Security. That was on Monday. Talking about the following group that is going to be announced, their plans, we are talking here about Hondurans. About 83,000 will have an extended of 6 months starting in January to see what is going to be the next step. But what we are all waiting is what is going to be announced regarding Salvadorians, that we're talking a group of about at least 200,000 people. And we'll get the news about if the Department of Homeland Security is going to extend the program for 18 months, as they have been doing it since the 1990s when they implemented, or it's going to be extended only for 6 months to give them some time in order to organize themselves and go back home. The situation has created a lot of anxiety, a lot of reactions. Many of the NGOs that are organizing and helping about 300,000 Central Americans that we're talking here, the 4 groups that are under the TPS. We're talking Guatemalans, Hondurans, we're talking about Nicaraguans, and we're talking about Salvadorians. Most definitely believe that they're going to appeal regarding the Congress and regarding the President, and they hope that something is going to happen, like, for example, that they could grant their citizenship.
Okay, so thank you for that. That update from our correspondent Jorge Gestoso in Washington. In Argentina, during the National Women's March in the province of Chacao, representatives from different political parties, social movements, and feminist organizations agreed to hold an assembly in the province of Huí. Our correspondent has the details.
During a preliminary session, the leaders decided the topics to be debated during the upcoming meeting in December in the province where social leader Milagro Sala is being illegally detained.
In that province, which truly is a factor for impunity and criminalizing those of us who fight for our rights, they want to brutally move forward with a political prisoner, with many political prisoners, and against those who are fighting for our rights.
We women will not allow this to happen. Milagro Sala was imprisoned for being a woman, for being indigenous, poor, working class, for organizing people, for creating work, and those are all the things they want to exterminate, so we will not back down.
United in rejecting the model of the government of the Cambiemos coalition, Argentinian women promised to put a stop to the systematic violations of human rights.
This is a women's movement that has the peculiarity of being cross-sectional, covering different political orientations and beliefs. This gives us the strength of mobilization. There are topics that obviously unite us, and we want to take advantage of our strength.
Bringing all these voices in the region back into the conversation so that we can understand what our problems as women are, as a feminized body, as feminists, therefore providing an answer to neoliberalism that generates violence, and helping people understand that violence against women is not just interpersonal, it's a complex form of violence.
Starting off from their own experiences, campesinas, indigenous women, unemployed and working women from the region will be the voices that denounce the violence they suffer.
There's too much solitude. There's too much fragmentation. There's fear. Power instills fear. The police state works to divide vulnerable sectors. And, well, what us women want is to work against that, to work on embraces, on encounters, to be able to listen to one another, and to know we can be very different, yet whatever unites us will be stronger. That's the message we want to put forth as a women's assembly.
Besides taking on the many issues that affect them, they will denounce the harassment the leader of the Tupac Amaru suffers at the hands of the government, and Justicia Jujeños. They will also demand her immediate release.
This week, Brazilian President Michel Temer will present a proposal for a new law to privatize Brazil's state-run power company, Eletrobras. CEO Wilson Ferreira Jr. confirmed that Eletrobras will be privatized by a law passed in Congress, and that the government would continue to hold a golden share in the company. Eletrobras will issue new shares in the second half of 2018 as part of the plan to dilute the government's stake and privatize the company. The Brazilian government intends to reduce its stake to less than 40%. In Chile, the 8 presidential candidates took part in the last debate of their campaign, discussing issues related to drug trafficking, pensions, and retirement. Former Chilean President Sebastián Piñera is a favorite to win the elections with an austerity program and a promise to turn Chile into a developed country in 8 years. The government's party candidate, Alejandro Guilher, is second in the polls. He assured the people that he will continue President Michelle Bachelet's policies and will fight drug trafficking. The presidential elections are set to take place on November 19th. Schools in Mexico City are still suffering after last month's major earthquake. Students and their parents are demanding swifter action by the government, as our correspondent Pablo Perez reports.
So we're here standing in one of the most important crossroads in Iztapalapa, one of the poorest peripheral areas of Mexico City. Here, both parents and teachers are protesting because the kids, in school age, hasn't had classes for over 2 months, since the September 19th earthquake. So they report 69 schools with heavy damage from the earthquake, and none of them has been attended by the rebuild effort promised by the Secretary of Education. They decided that cutting roads, and they are cutting the three most important highways attending Iztapalapa, is their only way to cut the attention of the authorities that are responsible of the rebuild efforts of the schools, which they are saying it's been focused in most prosperous areas. This is the information from here from Mexico. We go back to you.
Thanks for that, Pablo Perez. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Seoul to hold a candlelight vigil against U.S. President Donald Trump's visit as part of his Southeast Asian tour. Protesters gathered in the city's historic center while holding anti-Trump and anti-war banners, making a stand for peace in the region. During his visit to South Korea, Trump said he hopes the U.S. doesn't have to use full military force against North Korea, although he also said that the U.S. is ready to do what's necessary in case of conflict.
He who is wielding hegemonic tyranny against the world by supporting racism, anti-migration policies, and prioritizing the U.S. is a war maniac.
Today, the U.S. President Trump came to our country. About 5,000 people gathered at the Gwanghwamun Square to hold a candlelit vigil opposing Trump and protesting against the threat of war, forceful sales of weapons, and economic pressure.
Our correspondent Isio Diaz has more.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is in South Korea. Over here, he has used much lighter language than he did when visited Japan. One of the first places Trump visited in South Korea was Camp Humphreys, the military base where 28,500 American soldiers are deployed. There, he said that the U.S. is talking to their generals based in the Asian country about the situation with North Korea, and he promised that everything will be under control. This promise comes after he tweeted that he will resolve all problems with North Korea. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in praised the bond between the two nations, although he is doing it so while a number of protests are taking place against Donald Trump's visit, as people ask for peace in the Asian region. Both presidents announced they will engage in an agreement to lift the nuclear weight restrictions for South Korea. Right now, the weight limit is 500 kilos. Trump and Moon Jae-in said that they want the conflict in the peninsula to be resolved in a peaceful and diplomatic way. They will cooperate to strengthen South Korea's military capacity in the peninsula. Donald Trump said that his country is prepared to use all of their military capacity against North Korea if necessary. The U.S. president is looking to build a strong alliance with Japan and South Korea regarding Pyongyang, specifically before arriving to Beijing on November 8th. Although in the past, Trump has praised China's position on the conflict in the peninsula, now the U.S. president wants to pressure the Asian giant to take a stand on this matter to pressure North Korea, especially in an economic point of view. Back to you in studios.
Isio Diaz with that report. So let's go back to Russia and those celebrations for the 100th anniversary of the October Revolution. Our correspondent in Moscow, Hansel Oro, has more.
Russia and the world are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution that took place in 1917. The Russian Communist Party, in coordination with other communist parties and leftist organizations, celebrated in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Several activities marked the cultural and historic aspect of the revolution that brought change to the political conscience of the workers, the defense of their rights, and the lives of the campesinos. But undoubtedly, it was not only 1917 that marked the history but many years of Russian Revolution, which left a legacy for the national liberation movement since the October Revolution. Also for Latin American and Caribbean countries, the legacy of Russian Revolution was remarkable. Other aspect that should also be highlighted is the presence of delegates from all over the world that attended this event. There was also a forum which was led by President and leader of the Communist Party, who was grateful for the commemorative acts to mark the great socialist revolution of October. Russia's own President Vladimir Putin said this event undeniably changed the world in the beginning of the 20th century, and that historic legacy continues with the new generations with the respect for the political struggle of the people.
Reported from Moscow, Hansel Oro. And we've come to the end of this midday news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sunny Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Lo que nosotros seguimos creando